All right. As promised, we are starting on time. We have everyone here. Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you joining us today on the Open Innovator platform. Right. I'm Naman, and I'll be a host and moderator for this session today. You know, I just completed 15 years of my professional journey working with the startups. Yes. And if there's one thing that I've learned is that every founder believes their product is the next big thing, right? Seriously, every founder believes they have a path-breaking solution, but the real test begins when they, go out to find their first 10 customers, right? And that brings me to a little story. A few years back, one of my friends started a company, super excited, full of ideas. He told me, "Man, this product is going to change the world." Pretty cool, right? I mean, these days, if you don't throw in lines like world changing, path breaking, impact creating, people don't take you seriously, right? They think you are just making an app that reminds you to drink water, right? So I asked him, okay, how many customers do you have? Well, to my surprise, he smiled confidently and said, "One, my mom already signed up." Well, and that, my friend, is a classic startup trap that I have personally experienced, right? You think your first 10 customer will magically show up just because your product is amazing? No. Even getting the first one feels like, convincing your landlord not to increase the rent. It's possible, but it takes strategy, persistence, and a bit of luck. In fact, earlier today I was reading a report that studies 42% of startups fail because they can't find customers, and that's almost half, which basically means your product can have AI, blockchain, agentic AI, metaverse, sprinkle of magic dust, everything. But if no one is buying it, it's very, very, very expensive hobby. But here's a good news. So right now, I have a good news for all of you all who has joined today. So to understand how to crack your first 10 customers and how to change things suddenly, we have set up a panel today. And also, you need to understand. I already see a lot of people waiting in the lobby. I request the team to accept them so that everyone joins in on time. So yes, I was just quickly talking about cracking those first 10 customers, and suddenly things change. They don't just buy from you, they give you feedback.
Uh, Hello. I'm just connecting with Naman. He will be joining in soon. There might be some network issue.
I'm so sorry. Am I back? Okay, I think my laptop heated up. I'm so sorry. All right, looks like I'm back. And so all right, so that's exactly why we are here today. How to get your first 10 customers, and 10 customers, by that we mean actual real customers, not your parents or not your neighbors or not your friends. So sit tight. We have got an amazing panel without further ado. And also we have got a startup pitch. Yes, you heard that right, a startup pitch. And hopefully some hard truth and fun stories coming along the way. Right. So now let's meet our panelists. And today we are introducing them in a slightly, I would say, fun way. You will see their superhero avatars on the screen now. Because believe me, each of them has bring a superpower of their own. Right. First we have Angeli, the storyteller, the guardian angel of growth, right? Her superpower is creating brand narrative that stick with people long after campaign ends. Next up, we have Jack, the strategist, I would call him, the archangel of advocacy. His superpower turning complex marketing challenges into clear winning playbooks. You'll see it later today. And finally, we have Chanel, the connector. Her superpower is building communities, opening doors that help startups scale. And let me tell you, together, this superhero team is going to help us decode what it really takes to get your first 10 customers. So now let's dive straight into the heart of today's topic. Winning your first customer is often the toughest part of any startup journey. We all agree, right? And while we talk about strategy, we talk about channels, we talk about playbooks, a lot of it really comes down to mindset, right? So let's start there with our opening question. If you had to, and that's a common question for all our speakers, if you had to describe the biggest mindset shift founders need to make, to get those first 10 customers, what would it be? Anjali, let's start with you.
Thank you. Happy to start. And thank you for having me. It's great to be here with all the other speakers. And hello to everybody who is dialing in virtually. So to answer the question, what's the mindset? It really is the difference between what we call founder-led sales and a scalable sales model. And just like you said, Naman, when you're first starting, most founders, they think about just getting their family, friends, whoever. That is not, as you said, the first real 10 customers, and that is also not product market fit. Product market fit is something that you can scale over and over again. A lot of the traps that founders find themselves in is they will over customize their product just to get in clients or just to get in bigger accounts or even their first account. So really dialing it back to what is the actual core. And this is difficult because sometimes you might have to get rid of features at the beginning. Sometimes you might have to figure out, okay, what is just what we call the black box, the bare minimum? And then that bare minimum is something you can scale over and over again. So my rule of thumb is for every 10 people that you talk to with that particular product proposition and sales pitch, would 8 out of 10 people purchase it? If 8 out of 10 people would purchase it in every single cohort, you know that you have something.
Well, that's brilliant point to start with. It really set the tone for how founders should think beyond just selling a product, right? So Jack, let me come to you next. Jack, from your experience building brands and helping companies land their early adopters, right? What mindset shift do you think is the most critical for founders to win those first customers?
Yeah, in terms of an actual shift, in terms of getting from where you are to where you need to be, what I found is a lot of people who are starting out as building something of their own, they usually have quite a strong background as a product person, as a salesperson. They have some proven track record in a related area. And the challenge there is they will have in the past been extremely focused on deliverables, on very clear metrics for what they need to do next. And in my experience, founders have to switch quite dramatically to being more input based and output based. You have to receive a lot of information and you have to be able to use that information accordingly. So it's very tempting to focus on what do I do next? What's the thing that I make? You actually need a lot of information coming in to make intelligent decisions. I'm very influenced by the example of Dropbox. So Dropbox, their founder had a great approach to this. A guy called Drew Houston. He did a very simple thing. He released a 3-minute video about what Dropbox would do, which was very revolutionary at the time. File sharing we take for granted now. It was a huge deal. He said, this is what Dropbox does. This is how it will work. This is why it should be interesting to you. Released it to a relevant community and immediately took the number of signups from about 5,000 to well over 70,000. And their first 10 or 100 or probably 1,000 customers were in those 70,000 people. But the amazing thing is they hadn't even built Dropbox yet. He was just finding out if it seemed like a good idea because he had that inputs focus. He didn't focus on the deliverable of actually building Dropbox, purely on explaining it to people to see if they wanted it first. And that's vitally important. It's exactly what we were just hearing about the product market fit. You have to know there's a genuine demand for what it is that you're making. But I sense we may have lost a man again.
Yeah, I believe it's the same. But yeah,
Hard luck.
thanks for sharing the insights, Jack. I will take over the same question with Celine. So what's the idea, how we can start getting those first 10 customers?
So I think for me, the biggest shift has been kind of learning to focus on less, but to do it better. So the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule, is the idea that 80% of your results often come from just 20% of your efforts. So in marketing, that would mean that most of your sales or your traffic would probably come from a really small number of activities or channels or customers. So I think rather than trying to focus on doing absolutely everything on every platform, every tactic to every audience, it's more about finding the few things that actually move the needle and then doubling down on those. And then I think in terms of audience, you don't need everyone, you just need the right 10 people. So I would also say nail who your customer actually is, not just their job title, but really visualize them. So what do they eat for lunch? What music do they listen to? And where do they hang out, both online and offline? So let's say, for example, if you're building an AI tool, your market could be absolutely massive. But if you niche down, let's say to like event marketers like me, suddenly it's a lot easier to see where they show up. So maybe that's LinkedIn, maybe that's sponsoring an industry newsletter, or even something scrappy like a collaboration with the bar that's next to my office, where people would often frequent for after work drinks. So I think once you can see your customer clearly as a real person, the opportunities to reach them become a lot more obvious.
Great. Thank you, Selin, and sorry for the little goof up. I believe that's a powerful perspective. And you know what's really interesting is I'm just getting a lot of messages from our attendees as well. So what's really interesting is how all three of you have highlighted different angles of the same challenge. And together it paints a real picture of what founders need to shift in their mindset. And I just got a real time data that out of all the attendees right now, more than 60% of them are founders, right? Our team is trying to narrow it down to how many of them are first time founders, right? And if you're a founder listening right now, the takeaway is simple: your product gets you in the game, but your mindset wins you the first 10 customers. So we'll move to round two. We'll go a little deeper with some personalized questions for each of you. Jack, this time I'll begin with you. Today, founders have a buffet of choices when it comes to customer acquisition in particular, such as you just mentioned social media, LinkedIn, content marketing, partnerships, paid ads, and many more, right? But when resources are tight, for the first time founders, or let's say time is limited, focus is everything. So from your experience, Jack, how should a founder decide whether to focus first for maximum impact? What do you think?
Yeah, it's a really tough challenge. I think Celine just outlined there. You do have to narrow in, you do have to focus up, because the temptation to be everywhere, and I mean, like, I'm in the B2B space, I'm selling um, telephony software, and even we are subject to this idea that we should be on Reddit or we should be on TikTok. It's obviously not really the case. We're not actually going to find our customers there. But you hear that voice at the back of your head, why don't we have a really popular Instagram profile? Well, it's because there aren't a lot of middle and upper managers working in the call center space who are going to buy with ads that they see on Instagram. Nonetheless, you'll be in meetings where someone raises their hand and says, actually, maybe we should get in on Tumblr while the getting's good. It's never the case. People are really, I think, experience a lot of FOMO, and you have to take focus over FOMO. You are not going to miss out drastically by not being on every single place. You're going to miss out drastically by not focusing on where you can be. So those are your two filters. It's where does your audience genuinely spend their attention? I know for me, I'm lucky. It is actually LinkedIn. We do have an enormous potential audience on LinkedIn, and that's a real blessing because obviously the LinkedIn audience is quite engaged. But it's also where you can consistently show up with value. So that's the other side of why my brand isn't on TikTok. It's why we're not on Instagram. It's not just because our audience isn't there, or at least they're not there with a work mindset. It's because we couldn't consistently go to those places and offer anyone anything of value. We would not be convincing on TikTok. Quite the reverse. We would be extremely embarrassing on TikTok. We would be easily the worst TikToks you've ever seen in your life. Um, I think a really good example for me, you can tell I like drawing from real world examples a lot. Twilio did this really well, probably coming up on 2 decades ago now. So they're a developer tool, right? Twilio is a developer tool. They have a very, very clear idea of who their audience is. And so they focused entirely on developer marketing. So they did a lot of events. They did things like hackathons. They engaged with what evangelists they could find in that field, but they also focused on their product documentation. And I find that really interesting because as a non-technical person, I wouldn't have ever thought of product documentation as a channel. And most people still don't. If you do documentation well, it's because you have an IT team or a customer success team who are already focused on that. They're already passionate about that, principally for existing customers, for onboarding and for reducing tickets, things like that. But actually, if you have an audience who knows that that's an asset they're going to draw on in the future, then it makes complete sense that you should be there. So they put an enormous amount of effort into flirting with that audience. They even, when they started running big scale advertising campaigns, when they put things on billboards, when they had to go after real decision makers, people with financial responsibility, their tagline was always "Ask your developer," because they knew that they could never really explain in any detail what they do as a technical product to a largely non-technical audience. They just said, go and ask the person in your company who's relevant. We already have them on our side. We've already won their attention. So if you go and speak to them, we actually don't need to persuade you as a CEO or as somebody in a non-technical role. We already have someone in your organization who's going to convince you. Not every startup is going to have quite such a clear community. Developers are great because they already conceptualize themselves as a community. Not everyone will have something that's quite so well defined, but there is always a place where your audience is focusing a lot of their time and when you can keep showing up. And it does also, what it teaches me is that you don't need to think in terms of, right, okay, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, cold email. If you think about how people are really finding value, there are opportunities outside of what we traditionally define as channels, and that's incredibly important.
Very well summed up. Thanks, Jack. That was really insightful, especially, the part that you mentioned, focus over FOMO. And right, I'm sure our startups are making notes, right? And it's a challenge so many founders face. And your perspective, makes it very clear. Anjali, let me, come to you now. You often, we have gone through a profile, we have gone through a lot of posts. You often emphasize that brand is all about how people feel, not just how it looks, right? That's such a powerful thought, by the way. Could you share how you personally use storytelling and emotional connection to bring the first 10 customers on board?
Absolutely. So, to everyone who's listening, I will tell you that brand has always been and will always be the original revenue driver. And so, for those of you that maybe are skeptical about that, what I always tell people is if you've ever been to a Starbucks and you've ordered some of their coffee, it's overly priced coffee versus a general place on maybe the side corner in the end of your street. That in right there is branding. But as far as storytelling is concerned, for those of you that might have heard of Tony Robbins, he's a really famous, motivational speaker. He always says, people don't buy what you sell, people believe what you believe. And this is the essence why companies like Apple will really be able to come out and be market leaders. And I have to say, even nowadays, they don't actually have the superior products. So if you take a Apple MacBook and you compare it against a Microsoft Surface tablet, Microsoft Surface is far superior. As far as all of, the technicalities, but people are still buying, Apple MacBooks because they really came out with their original campaign, which was Think Different. And it actually had nothing to do with the computer. They created a movement. Now, if we fast forward, to these earlier days, you can look at a company like Notion. When you look at the interface of Notion, it's quite bland and it's quite boring. And let's be honest, it was really made for, I don't know, developers, engineers. It's really not that intuitive, etc. Not so beautiful to look at. But what they did on, I would say, sales, marketing, and branding side, again, is they created a movement. The same thing you can look at is Clay. So Clay is the hot AI tool right now. So for all you founders, probably, and I don't work for them, just so that you know, but to go ahead and take a look at what they're doing. They're introducing this concept of the go-to-market engineer. They're creating communities. They're creating, Clay hubs in different cities around the world. They're looping people in and they're getting everybody on board with this belief. So just to kind of take it to a personal thing, all of the founders who are listening right now, let's say in your personal lives, you have, certain friends that you resonate with, other friends that you don't. And there's that one saying that you'll never remember what someone said, but you'll always remember, how they made you feel. And that is the essence of brand. So you can literally hold up different logos, whether it's Nike, Apple, Clay, Notion, whatever it is, and you can really understand what that feeling is. And that feeling and that belief is what will help you get, your 10 customers on a more tactical level. Because a lot of founders will say, yeah, brand is great, it's super fluffy, but how does it really work? And do I need a huge budget to create campaigns? The answer is no, you don't. So to tack on a little bit to what Jack was saying, just start writing. And as a founder, I very much believe in what we call founder-led brand. Use yourself, start talking about it, whether it's on social, start writing about it. It can just be a blog or it can be in different publications, but let people know who you are, why you're doing what you're doing, what you want people to believe. And the interesting thing is a lot of founders can talk forever about their product, but when you just stop them for one moment and you say, why do you believe in this and why should people care? A lot of founders get stuck on that question. So I always tell founders, if you can't articulate very simply why people should care and what you believe, how do you expect your customers to do that? So just taking it back, it doesn't matter how many tools you have, brand will end up being your original revenue driver. So use the storytelling to your advantage.
Well, thank you, Anjali. And there you have it. The word has been said out loud and clear. Storytelling isn't just marketing fluff. And I really loved your example that it's not what is said, it's how they made you feel, right? So it's what builds real trust, I believe, right? And loyalty, of course. And I think a lot of founders forget that people don't just buy products; they buy into stories. And so, Shalin, on the same note, this connects really well to your experience. You have worked very closely with tech communities and emerging markets, where building trust is everything. Trust is essential. So, from your perspective, Shalin, how can storytelling and authentic content help a startup win those first 10 golden customers?
So I think it's no secret that storytelling is absolutely crucial. And I think especially in the early days, your personal brand is a lot more powerful than your company brand because people don't just buy a product, they buy into you and your journey and the actual why behind why you're building it. So I think that means showing the real story, both the highs and the lows. The messy bits are kind of what will make you relatable, and that will often turn early adopters into loyal fans. So the example I want to use is Billie Eilish. She uses her Instagram close friend stories for all of her fans. And I think that's really effective in making people feel like they're on the inside and they're part of her world. And I think startups can do the same thing, but on a smaller scale. So that would mean bringing your audience behind the scenes, sharing your first win, your first failure, or like the all-nighter that you pulled to, ship a feature. And I think when customers feel like they're friends, they want to support you. And that trust and that authenticity is often what will get you those first 10 customers long before your logo or your website design does.
No, that's an interesting take and interesting point. Jack, just wanted to understand from you, based on your experience, has there been any rare story or an exceptional story that you found out that getting first 10 customer, even beyond getting first 10 customers, there has been some challenge and some point, and the startup might not have succeeded even after acquiring first 10 customers. So it's not that if you get a first 10 customers you are bound to succeed, but yes, the probability do increase. But do you think getting first 10 customers actually increases the probability of startup success?
It's certainly the first hurdle to cross, right? That's probably when you get to open your first bottle of champagne or however it is you're going to celebrate. That being said, probably most of us in the room are in different spaces where there are Goliath businesses that we're competing with mounds of venture capital behind them, and their first 1,000 customers who look very successful, but actually on a business fundamentals level are still essentially failing. They have a lot more scope for what successful failure might mean. And we're seeing a lot in our telecoms industry at the moment. There are a lot of tech giants, or maybe retiring giants from the early millennium, who have a sort of a pre-cloud on-premises approach, and we're stealing huge amounts of business from them at the moment. And these are businesses with hundreds of millions in revenue, billions in valuation, but they are as vulnerable as startups in some ways, because you might, as a startup, you might really need every one of those 10 customers, or just the same, these large companies need every one of their 5,000 customers. So it's very, very hard to say as a general rule how successful are you at this stage. You know better than anybody else. So long as you have got to a point where you can be honest about what your actual revenue requirements are, what your level of investment is. Of course, I know from experience, if you are bootstrapping, then it's technically harder because there is just less money playing around. But of course, you get a greater sense, more scope for defining what your success metrics are, what you actually need to get along. Whereas as soon as you've taken, as we have, as soon as you've taken that venture capital money, things get substantially easier in one sense because you have a little bit of breathing room, but you also have some extremely hard-nosed people who are interested only in the business fundamentals, who are now very influential in deciding how successful you're actually being. It's an enormous step to take, and it does change your dynamic with the business beyond all scope, beyond all measure.
Well, there's such a strong point, Jack. And so across all three of you, what we are hearing is a common thread. Whether it's choosing the right channels, creating an emotional connection, or building authentic stories. Founders can't just push a product; they have to build a relationship, right? And that's the real difference between being noticed and being remembered. So, right, and this is an interesting discussion. We'll take a short pause and shift gears to our next exciting segment, our startup pitch. That's a short elevator startup pitch. It's my, pleasure to introduce Puneet Agrawal, founder of AI Lifebot. Puneet and his team actually are doing some truly cutting edge work in the world of agentic AI, building voice first autonomous AI engines. And these are enterprise grade platforms that they are already making waves with customers across the globe. Puneet, can we have you on the screen, please? All right, looks like Puneet, looks like there's some trouble at Puneet's end. All right, we'll continue the discussion. I'll start with Shalin this time. Shalin this time. Puneet, I can see you on screen. Okay, so some technical challenge. All right, Shalin, we'll continue the discussion. Shalin, you have had a front row seat working with startups across emerging markets. And if you think about your own early experiences, what's one thing you would do differently when approaching those very first customers?
मैं मुझे अलाउ कर हाँ मुझे मैंने दोबारा ज्वाइन कर रहा हूँ अलाउ कर
So that's a great question. Would it be okay if I shared two examples? So one that I've implemented myself and then one I've seen from the startup. Okay, so from my personal experience, in my last role, I was working on an event called Africa Tech Festival, and lead generation was a really big part of my work. And our award show consistently generated over 10,000 leads every year, while our content, so our reports and ebooks, only brought in a few hundred every year. And I made it my mission to bridge that gap. And I knew that the awards were successful because people were voting for their peers. So I borrowed from that dynamic. And I created a report on the top 100 leaders in Africa's tech and telecom ecosystem. and it cost absolutely nothing to produce. I didn't spend anything on ads, but that became our highest performing content piece to date. And that generated 117,000 impressions, over 5,000 engagements, and 650 downloads, which were all completely organic. So I think the lesson in that is to double down on what already works. And in this case, it was community recognition and repurposing that into content that people genuinely want to engage with. And then my other example comes from the Thursday dating platform, who, although I haven't directly worked with them yet, they often implement out of the box tactics that I absolutely love. Especially in the beginning when they didn't have big budgets, they really leaned into guerrilla marketing, and they made these like bold, funny stunts into shareable moments. And my personal favorite was when they brought an actual camel into central London with a sign on its back that said "Happy Hump Day, see you on Thursday." I thought it was really unexpected and funny and memorable, and it performed really well on social. So I think the lesson in that is, you know, your first 10 customers don't often come from really polished ad campaigns, but they come through these quirky ideas that cut through the noise and make people kind of stop and think and share.
Well, there you have it. Quirky ideas is the thing. You know, the founder should think out of the box and try to do something that has not been done before, right? Don't fear experimenting, right? You never know what can land you, a new customer. So thanks, Ellen. That's such a sharp reflection. Jack, we'll come to you next. You have helped multiple brands, companies, find their first customer. So looking back, if you had a chance to redo your own early customer journey, what's the one thing you would approach differently now?
Yeah, I'm going to struggle to do just one. I think when you look back, you do take a sharp intake of breath of the various mistakes that you made. Something that's interesting that just occurred to me, as Shalene and Angeli both mentioned, was the founder marketing, which we were very, very late to. We could have made an enormous amount out of that very, very early on, because you can do it on practically no budget at all. And it's something that we have used fairly frequently, especially with our CEO, but I'm doing it more myself now, my own personal brand, and our chief revenue officer as well. Even our AEs, where possible, putting them in front of an audience. And what I've noticed is that people at real life events come up to our CEO with this look that they know him from somewhere. And it's strange because we're only talking about videos on LinkedIn, but they treat him like a minor celebrity. They treat him like he's some kind of influencer, someone they should recognize. And when they figure it out, they're actually quite enthusiastic that where they know him from. It has this big, big impact. And of course, if you're talking about the potential for conversions, the number of those people who are going to um, have a coffee that turns into a prospecting meeting, it goes up an extravagant amount. It goes up hugely. So it's something I wish we'd started early on, especially when it would have been really helpful in those extremely difficult first couple of years. But overall, I think the main thing looking back that we should have done differently was had a better sense of our ICP. So probably not taking some of the customers that we did, almost the opposite of what you said. But actually, we had among our first 10 customers and among our first 20 customers, we had people we were really bending over backwards to win and to retain because they weren't actually good customers for us. Often because they were too small. They were way too small. We're principally a mid-market and an enterprise tool. But in those early days, those are the hardest rooms to get into. Very small businesses will give you the time of day, they will talk to you. What they won't do is pay you enough money to really be sustainable customers. And we have repeatedly reached a point where actually we've spoken to them and said, we're not really the best option for you. Truth be told, we don't make very much money from you, but also there are far simpler ways for you to do what you need to do because you don't need a tool of this scope, of this complexity. So I would, looking back in time, say we have to have the confidence to only approach the customers that we actually genuinely want. And we certainly can't develop the product in the direction that they need. So this is something else that we did early on, was to say like, okay, they really want this particular feature, they really want this added to the roadmap, or they want this amount of contact time, which is a very expensive thing to have with our developers. But we'll do it because they're an early customer, because we're a young company, and because we just want to show enthusiasm, we want to show willing. I would strictly not do that. You have to have your line. This is our bottom, this is our top, and our customer is person who fits within those two boundaries. It's so tempting to take any money that you can get at the first stage, but it's not something that I would do again.
Well, the word has been said out loud. Don't just run after any customer, right? You plan, strategize, and then go and deep dive after the customers. Great take, Jack and Anjali. Over to you. You know, you have worked across industries and geographies, right? If you went back to those early customer days, what's one thing you would change in how you approach them now?
So the one thing that I would change is not just looking at your first clients as a transactional situation. Look at them for lifetime value, but also look at them for how they can refer and expand your sales and ecosystem. And I think as an early stage founder, a lot of people, they're just trying to get people through the door. They're saying, okay, you have a certain revenue goal by a certain date, and they're just counting 1 to 10. Okay, I've got my 10 customers. Let's try to iterate and get to the next 10. Think about how you can use those clients to help you sell. So a lot of these old school tactics that are very tried and true, they're golden rules for a reason. Referral programs and network selling, and I don't mean fancy affiliate link programs, but I just mean old-fashioned referrals. Get your client on a video. You can take your mobile phone, video the two of you together, talk about how great it was to use your product, the service, whatever it is you're trying to promote. You will not believe how effective it is, how long-standing it is. So start to think about how you can use your clients to sell more. And a lot of founders actually don't think about that because there are so many things that they're trying to do that they're not thinking of, the long term and the longevity.
All right, that's a brilliant way to close this round. Anjali, I would also want you to take a few questions, or anyone who would like to come in. We have got a question. Okay, so Jack, you mentioned about focusing more on prioritizing focus than FOMO, right? So there is a question from one of the founders, I believe. Does FOMO apply to selling to corporates as well? If you are selling it to a corporates, will FOMO apply to them as well, unlike selling it to a normal consumer? And also, just to quickly add, in the interest of time, another question we have from Harmina: how to balance between personalization and having a repeatable process? Dropbox is a great example, but how can we protect the secret sauce at an early stage, as everything can be reverse engineered? Well, that's an interesting question. Any of you can take it up. Anjali, would you like to take it up?
Sure.
How do we protect a secret sauce?
Okay, this is an interesting one because we're now in this fourth technological age and everyone's heard about AI and all the AI tools, and there's tons of tools out there. It is going to become increasingly more difficult, right, to protect the secret sauce because so many tools are going to be back engineering in. And you look at companies like Lovable and you can vibe code different products, etc. This is where positioning, storytelling, because a lot of people even come to me and they ask, how do we rank in the GPTs? It used to be in Google or whatever, search bar you're doing. And now people are going into ChatGPT and they're saying, what's the best software for this? What's the best service for that? How do you rank there? So this is why going back to the content, the storytelling, also what I call the paradox of choice. And it doesn't matter if you've got a marketing tool, a technical tool, doesn't matter what tool. If you just Google for your tool, there are going to be so many different results unless you're creating some, new thing from scratch. So the differentiation piece is going to become even more important. That differentiation, an important point to make here, is not always about product features, because that's usually the first thing that founders go to. They're like, we have to out feature, the competitor. When you try to do that, it's a race to the bottom, right? So the best way to protect your secret sauce is to make sure that you have other elements that are competitive: storytelling, service, referral programs. When you think as an individual, whatever services that you use, why do you stay with those services? So just think about that. Whether it's food delivery, whether it is video streaming platforms, whether it's shopping for clothes, it doesn't matter what it is. Think about why you stay with that, Maybe you love the brand. Maybe you love the service. Maybe you like the fact that they always have the selection that you want. And then think about that buying process and retainment process, back engineer that into your own product and services. So I think that's one of the best things that you can do. But the whole dynamic and the whole industry is going to change between now and 2030. So these things will become even more important.
Well, that yet again an interesting take. We'll now move to Jack quickly. Puneet, will come to you after we take one inputs from Jack and Shellen. So Jack, over to you. How do you save your secret sauce, right? I
Yeah, at the risk of repeating, yeah, you do have to focus on a differentiator. I'm reminded of that quote that it's not the best product that wins, but the best story. That is not true in 100% of cases, but if it's true in about 98%, then it's still the lesson that you have to take away. In essence, it's almost a bad thing, really, because often the best product is buried under these great storytelling of products that don't compete so well. I mean, nobody owns a Betamax player. Okay, nobody owns a VHS player either. But for a long stretch, we all had VHS players and they didn't work as well as Betamax players. But we were all convinced to buy the wrong one. And that happened, and the better product was banished to complete obscurity to the point where the younger people in the call won't know what I'm talking about. But that was a moment in time. It is tricky to pick your differentiator. You have to some degree, let it emerge organically from what you do well, but you also have to base it on the kind of feedback you get. So you'll never be entirely happy. It's a very sort of mercurial process to find it. I know that in our case at Babelforce, from whenever I do customer feedback, whenever I put together our case studies, the main piece of feedback I get is that everyone adores our customer success team. Right? In a way, it's our best differentiator because we made a very conscious choice to link our customer success and product team very, very closely to the point where they can almost work interchangeably, where they can swap roles for a while. So we have an extremely well-informed customer success team. That's very important for us for being seen as a tech company with tech people in it. I'm by far and away the least technical person in the whole organization. So we've made that decision and we've stuck with it that our customer success team provides better service than you'll get anywhere else in the industry, even though that's principally a retention driver rather than a driver of new business. So it still has this tremendous value. And it means that it's very easy for us to get positive referrals from existing customers, which are, as we've covered, absolute gold dust.
interesting, interesting. I'm sure the founders are making notes. Shellen, your take?
I think there's been a lot of really good points made, so I will keep my answer really brief. I think a founder that I worked with a few years ago said to me, if you wait until your product is perfect, until you launch, you've waited too long. So I think also it's just getting it done. You will make mistakes, you will make errors, but you'll learn from them. And I think also, as Anjali said, your storytelling is your differentiator. So that's focusing on really communicating those benefits in a way that feels relevant and helpful and persuasive to your customers. It's not about what it is, it's about why it's helpful and what problem it's actually solving in the market.
Storytelling is actually the differentiator, right? Very well said. So Puneet, we see you on the screen now finally. So we'll come to you, and before you take us through your solution, tell us how was it for you personally to go from 0 to 10, your first 10 customers, because that journey is never easy. I'm sure the audience would love to hear your story straight from you. Puneet, quickly.
Hope I'm audible now.
Yes, loud and clear.
Great.
Go on.
Great. Thank you so much. I think I echo with most of the points made by Shailen, Jack, and Anjali. My journey is so basically I had a very tough journey being a startup owner, and for me, I think the first 10 customers are everything for me right now. If any startup need to be created, I think the first 10 customers make the entire difference. So I take basically four uh, learnings from my side, which I think is very crucial. First is focus on problem, not the solution. So generally, what happens is when we start up, when we create a startup, we focus on a particular solution, what we have in mind, and then we go to the customer. I always believe that focus on the problem and then build the solution later on. Once you have the problem established and you have a solution which can solve that problem. So that is first area. Second is focus on micro niche rather than creating a generic platform or considering a generic solution to start with. That is not the best approach. So focus on a niche solution which is specific to a particular vertical. Let's say dentist. If you have any solution which you want to create for a dentist, focus on the dentist solution, and then once it is successful, you can maybe expand it to the other doctors, which let's say can be other vertical for that matter. So that gives a better, you can say, focused approach and early success. And third thing, which is very crucial, is uh, have the network, strong network, because initially when we are starting up a new organization, we don't have any good name or we don't have any established brand name to sell our product. So we are dependent on mostly on our network or connections, wherein we can get some early win through our network. So that is very, very important, that we should participate in the forums like NASCOM or similar organizations provide. So that helps us to get the visibility and get the network very strong. And fourth, which is Jack has also already mentioned, how do you differentiate your product? And nowadays everyone is talking about AI, and every product is having the AI already inbuilt. So CSM is something which we created a very differentiator. So I was very shocked when we have the customers coming in, switching in from the large brands to us. Why? Because our customer success was very strong. So we had invested good amount of focus on the tech people, as Jack mentioned as well. That focus is on the customer success, because that is what customer wants. Customer wants them to be very happy with their experience with us, and that experience is very crucial. So I think these are the four areas which I believe is very important for a startup to be successful in the early stage.
Perfect, perfect. You summed it up correctly, Puneet. And quickly now, in the next 5 minutes, can you walk us through the solution or the product that you have built?
Sure. So basically, what we created is we've created a agentic AI platform, which basically helps automating the voice. It's a voice first architecture. So uh, we are doing a lot of call center automations and building the AI agents using this platform uh, for for functional use cases, like you have got HR, IT, legal, sales, operations. So you can build your own agents using this platform. And so I'm going to show you a demo of a voice agent, what we created for a call center automation. Let me just share my screen.
Puneet, you can use the share button just beside the mic button.
So I'm just trying to do that. Actually, I need to share the voice as well. So let me just try.
If in case there is some live demo, even better. I mean, the video has a demo, right?
Yes.
Meanwhile, I would request all our speakers to, drop in your LinkedIn handle in the chat box. We are getting multiple requests from the attendees to connect with all our speakers today. So if you can drop in while the Puneet pulls up the screen, please drop in your LinkedIn profiles in the chat box. Puneet, looks like there's some challenge pulling up the screen. So you can just quickly explain what you have built, and then we move on with the next set of
Sure.
closing round.
Yeah. So basically, it's a voice agent, a voice-based call center automation agent, which basically addresses all the customer queries in a more personalized manner. In a more so we have got the guardrails inbuilt, and it basically is very personalized experience which every customer gets uh, while interacting with the brand. So the use cases are customer services. So any brand which has customers, ultimately for them the customer support is very crucial. So uh, getting to the platform, getting to the voice-based agent, and then getting the entire solution done. That is very seamless on our platform. It has got auto language switch, so you can have the multiple languages, which French or regional languages or Arabic. So you can choose any language for that matter, and basically it helps you to run the customer support seamlessly with omni-channel experience. So we have integrated the WhatsApp and omni-channel experience to this. and this works with the GenAI capability in a human-like experience.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. Thanks, Puneet. And before we wrap up, I would love to hear one final note from each of you, a key takeaway, a message, or even a piece of advice you would like everyone here to, walk away with. We start with Shilin. Any final piece of advice or a key takeaway for all our attendees and guests today?
I think when I think about kind of marketing and how I used to approach it in the earlier days, I think I was really guilty of just kind of announcing things. So, we've got this feature, we've launched this thing, like here's our event. But, announcements don't really move people. And like I was saying earlier, what does is persuasion and talking about why it actually matters and the problem it's solving and what they're going to gain by saying yes. So yeah, I guess my piece of advice is to spend less time on making announcements and more time like really learning how to communicate the benefits of your product or your service in a way that is relevant and persuasive to your potential customers.
Anjali?
Of course, I'm going to go back to the storytelling. I think I've scaled 3 big tech companies, 3 scale ups, 1 unicorn. This is the one thing that all the successful startups have done well. Every startup that is small, that grows to be massive, has a story. They give their belief statement. So it's really something that you can do very easy for all the founders. You can do this at home. Just take a pen and paper, write down what you believe. Make sure you put that into a story. You can write it on a blog that's for free. You can, video record yourself telling your story, put it up on social, that's for free. People buy from people that they believe what they believe in. So if you focus on that, it will get you through all of those product moments where you can't figure out how to get the product where you need it to be, all the features, and it actually will get you through if you decide to go the funding route. Investors, especially in the early stages, angel investors, so to speak, they are investing based off of your vision and what you believe. So focus on that because it is the one differentiator and it's the one thing that you really have control over, and it will take you so far.
Very well said. And Jack?
Yeah, so this is kind of a summary of some of the big points that we've talked about. I really found it difficult with positioning to figure out which bits you need and which bits you can leave aside for a while. Because if you just start Googling what's the foundations of positioning, what's the foundations of brand, you will find illimitable content, the 7 pillars of brand, the 14 elements of positioning, and then you're writing a mission statement and you're writing a vision statement and you're getting your audience psychometrics and it's too much. Like you can't do anything with it right away. You have to build a pretty tight foundation before you can do that. I would say there are 4 things you actually need to start out of the gate, which are your value proposition. What do we do? Your pain points, your solved pain points. Basically, why do we do those things? What do we achieve? Your ICP, so you know who you're selling to, and your differentiators, so why are we not the same as everything else? If you have those 4, then you have both the foundation of your story, but you also have a clear idea that you can communicate internally because what it is you're trying to achieve. Everything else, you will ultimately sit down and write brand values. You will ultimately sit down and do a lot of deep research into the specifics of your customers. And I've written many vision statements. On day 1, I would just have those 4 things. It's the value prop, pain points, ICP, differentiators. If you have those, you're good to roll.
All right, if you have that, you get a roll. All right, Puneet, your take?
Yeah, I
You are on
think.
mute. Mhm.
So can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so I think I'll agree with the Jack. I think it's very important for us to be very precise in terms of what we want to sell, what we want to create, rather than going everywhere. So be very precise in terms of what pain point we are solving. I think that gives me the most important part.
All right. With on that note, we have come to an end of today's exciting session, right? And there are a lot of questions we can't, in the interest of time, we can't take all of them, right? I would request all our attendees to connect with the speakers directly over LinkedIn, right? They are great mentors, great advisors. Once again, thank you, Selen, Jack, and Anjali for sharing such candid and valuable insight. What stand out personally for me out of this conversation is that while every founder journey is different, the essence is the same. Your first customers don't just buy a product, they buy into your story, like Anjali said, right? And I would say your conviction and your ability to listen and adapt makes a big difference. And a special thanks to Puneet for sharing his journey. For everyone here, whether you are building your first product or scaling to new markets, the message is loud and clear. Focus on authenticity, nurture trust, and never estimate the power of first few believers. And with that, let's carry forward today's learning and keep building stories that inspire and solutions that matter. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much, guys. Really interesting session.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for having me.